Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this Mr. Pandaria beta preview video. And in this video we're going to be taking a look at the 10-man normal mode version of Megaera in the Throne of Thunder raid. In order to have a go at this fight, not complete it because we didn't get a kill unfortunately, we used 2 tanks, 3 healers and 5 DPS. So this fight's a little bit weird in the sense of you're fighting Megaera, but you're not at the same time. So Megaera's there, but you can't see her and she has a certain health pool. Now she has these 3 different types of heads coming off of her, and once you've killed off one of the heads, her body, which you can't see, will take damage which will be equal to their head's maximum health. And then when you kill off one of the heads, 2 more will regrow in its place. So as I've mentioned, there's 3 different types of head for the normal mode version of this encounter, and when you kill off one of the heads, they will go back into what's called the concealing fog, and you can't attack them when they're in the fog. So the first head is the flaming head, and the flaming head's first ability goes by the name of cinders. Now as you can see by the nice little swirly icon there, this is a magic ability, so you can dispel it. The flaming heads will ignite a random player and will inflict 125,000 fire damage and an additional 75,000 fire damage every 1 second for 30 seconds. Now, if you have the Cinder debuff on you, you will be able to cause the Icy Ground debuff which is placed on you from the Frozen head, and to do that you just have to run over it, pretty much. However, if your Cinder's debuff is dispelled, it will spawn a pool of flames created at your location, which will stay there for 1 minute. The pool will inflict 125,000 fire damage every 1 second to any player that is standing within 5 yards of it. So you've got the option of either using the Cinder's debuff to melt the Icy Ground or to just be dispelled, but obviously if you are going to have it dispelled, make sure you're moving to the side of the rooms out the way. The Flaming Head's second ability goes by the name of Ignite Flesh, and this is where the head will breathe flames in front of her, inflicting 150,000 fire damage every second for 3 seconds. So the big hint there is the flames in front of her, so your tank does need to face this head away from the raid. If any players do get hit by the Ignite Flesh, they will burn for 35,000 fire damage every second for 45 seconds. And this is also a stacking effect on people that get hit. So if you get hit by it twice, you're going to be taking 70,000 fire damage every second. Your healers are going to want to slap you. Megaera's second head is the Frozen head, and its first ability is called Torrent of Ice. Now again, this ability will only be used when the head is within the concealing fog. And this is where the Frozen head will channel a beam of ice at a random player, and if the player does get hit by it, it will inflict 50,000 frost damage every half a second for 8 seconds, which is quite a lot of damage if you think about it. The beam will also freeze the ground in a path behind it, and will create the debuff Icy Ground for 1 minute. Now, as I've mentioned earlier, from the Flaming Head, if you do get the Cinder's debuff on you, you can run through this Icy Ground to get rid of it. However, if you do have the Torrent of Ice debuff on you, and one of the Cinder's pool has been dispelled, then you can run through the Cinder's pool. Obviously you'll take a little bit of damage, so your healers need to be aware of what you're doing, and it will get rid of the Cinder's pool, the Torrent of Ice beam will. Now as I've mentioned, it will also leave the Icy Ground debuff behind it, and this will inflict 80,000 frost damage every second to anyone that's touching it. It will also reduce movement speed by 5%, and this can stack up to 20 times, so obviously your movement speed can eventually come to a halt. You don't want that. And just like the first head, the second has a frontal cone ability as well. And this goes by the name of Arctic Freeze, and this is where she will inflict 150,000 frost damage every second for 3 seconds. Again, players hit by the Arctic Freeze will begin to freeze solid, and they're stunned for 20 seconds if they reach 5 stacks of the Arctic Freeze debuff. Now, as you can imagine, since your tanks will be facing them away from the raid, at some point there will be some form of tank swapping going on. I think when you say reach 3 debuffs of Arctic Freeze, or there's also another debuff put on you by the Venomous head, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, you'll need to obviously swap so that people don't get frozen in place or completely lose all their armor or get burnt to death. And finally, the third and final head. and this is the Venomous head, and its first ability goes by the name of Acid Rain. Again, this ability will only be used when the head is in the Concealing Fog, and this will be a globule of acid that will be spat at a random player and will inflict 350,000 nature damage to anyone when it impacts the ground. However, the damage of the acid rain can be reduced the further people are away from the point of impact. So it's kind of like on the Thunder King encounter, Li Shen, when he throws his axe or his spears or whatever, and it puts a little marker on the ground. The further you are away from it, the less damage you're going to take. Megaera's second ability for the Venomous head goes by the name of Rot Armor, and again, this is a frontal cone ability, so does need to be tanked away from the raid, and this will inflict 150,000 nature damage every second for 3 seconds. Now, anyone that is hit by Rot Armor will take 10% increased damage from all sources for 45 seconds, and this is also a stacking debuff. So that's why you do need to obviously do some tank swapping throughout this fight. So, as well as the 3 different heads for this fight, there are also some different abilities that Megaera herself has. Otherwise, I think the fights will be a little bit too easy, and hey, we want hard fights, it makes the game more fun. So, her first ability goes by the name of Rampage, and Megaera will begin to rampage whenever more than 2 of her heads are outside of the Concealing Fog, and this will inflict 45,000 elemental damage to every player every second. It's a lot of damage. As you can see, this is becoming a very, very healer intensive fight. And in addition, Megaera will also rampage for 20 seconds whenever one of her heads has been cut off, and the damage of each element is increased by 25% for each additional head of that element. So if you cut off one of her heads, there's also extra damage going out. So bring 5 healers. That's my tactic for this encounter. You need 5 healers, 2 tanks, and 3 DPS. Nothing else. Megaera's next ability goes by the name of Hydra Frenzy, and this will occur whenever one of her heads is killed, and what this will do is it will heal the remaining heads that are outside of the Concealing Fog back to full health, and it will also make them attack 30% faster. This is a stacking effect, so they're going to be attacking really fast at some point in the encounter. This ability is also kind of an anti-multi-dotting AoEing ability, because if you get all the heads down to the same health and then try and kill them off at the same time, if one dies first, the other 2 are going to get healed back to full health, so it'd be a waste of time. Megaera's next ability is the Elemental Blood of Megaera, and this will increase the damage of all her heads of the same type by 10% whenever a new head of that element is spawned, and this is also a stacking effect. So if you kill off the fire head and then another fire head spawns, it's going to have 10% increased damage. If you kill it off again and it spawns again, it'll have 20% increased damage. The damage increase is specific to the 3 different heads. So we're moving on to the last 2 abilities now, and one of them's been spoken about quite a bit, and this is the Concealing Fog. And this is when you kill off one of Megaera's heads, it will spawn 2 heads in the distance, and they are shrouded by thick, swirling fog, and you can't attack them directly. Megaera's also hiding in that fog apparently, so this is why you can't attack her directly. Whatever. And her final ability is Megaera's Rage. Now, her heads outside of the Concealing Fog will begin to spit at their target if they're not within melee range. Now, this effect will inflict 250,000 elemental damage to all enemies within 5 yards upon impact. So, as you probably guessed, you're going to be doing quite a bit of stacking up in this fight, which is beneficial for the Venomous head as well, because then if it does cast the Acidic Ball of Doom, you can all move at the same time, and obviously being stacked up helps a lot for AoE healing since there is a lot of damage in this fight. So that's going to do it for this Mr. Pandaria beta preview video, and I thought it was a really good fight. I enjoyed it. It seems like it's going to be a lot of fun to heal it instead of just standing there DPSing it, because there's a lot of damage going out at all times, so hey, it's what healers like. There's also a lot of movement involved for damage dealers as well, and I think in the testing we went with an all ranged group somehow. I'm not sure how we ended up with that, but we did. So Since this is a current try being played in the background as well, I will leave the video rolling until we've all wiped. But as always, thank you for watching, and if you are interested in future Mr. Pandaria beta preview videos, then please do feel free to subscribe to the channel.